Hello, everybody. This is Jeannie Novak.
And Levy.
And we are Evil Asterisk Podcast. We watched Ghostwatch.
Yes. We Ghostwatched Ghostwatch.
We did. This was a television movie, BBC television movie, from 1992.
That aired on Halloween,
Yes.
1992.
And it was very War of the Worlds-like, let's say in War of the Worlds fashion, and I should say the Orson Welles.
The radio adaptation.
Yeah, the radio adaptation by Orson Welles. It was a quote-unquote live broadcast that was done at the BBC studios on Halloween night. And it says, this is the description, part of the description on IMDb. A BBC team investigates a reported poltergeist in an ordinary London home. Well, it turns out that some people had no clue that this was a fictional account, thought it was real, and were scared to death, just like in War of the Worlds.
And I was trying to remember the name of a movie we saw recently that I think was inspired by this. And I'm going to run it by Jeannie for the first time now because I didn't remember the name.
I saw it recently?
We both did.
Are you talking about Late Night with the Devil?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I thought of that throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, me too, but I couldn't remember the title.
Throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
But that was a little different in that it wasn't aired to make it look like it was live and, sort of
Yeah, that was like we found the footage of the special that was banned.
Exactly.
But except that this one we just watched, Ghostwatch.
It was aired live,
and was
really
almost,
live.
And was almost banned, right?
It was banned. It was banned until it was available on video. So it didn't re-air because it terrified people.
It makes perfect sense because if you think about the audience in 1992, before YouTube, before fact-checking, there was an internet and you would find this kind of story on the internet, but how many people had access really in 92? So something like this airs on TV as a special, as if it's quote-unquote news. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine. Some kids would be traumatized by this thing.
And I think Michael Parkinson, who is the presenter, is someone, he's definitely an actor who's been around, but he has also hosted shows in the past.
Professional host.
So it looked like it was a real show that was being hosted by someone that everybody was familiar with. So it really interesting. And also had, traces of the found footage, that whole genre that ended up happening decades later. It definitely was way ahead of its time.
The Blair Witch happened in 1999, right? Or 2000?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
But anyway, so lots of other
and I wonder if this thing inspired The Conjuring 2, because if you remember, The Conjuring 2 takes place in England. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So let's get to it, and we won't do the spoilers yet, okay? And I know that a lot of people are going to probably predict what those spoilers might be, but let's start just talking a little bit about it. So that the setup. And what was very interesting about this is that it shows the studio, and they're in studio, and there's Michael Parkinson being the presenter in studio, and he has a parapsychologist or someone who had was very much
who just wrote a book about that family in particular.
Of course, it's not real, but she's there being interviewed, and she's in the studio with him. And then there's a whole... like a telethon. There's like a phone bank.
Yeah, phone operators.
There's a bunch of people answering phones over in a different corner of the studio, and people are calling in. And then they have people on screen. So sometimes you hear people calling in, and then the presenter and this doctor, and I should get her name, they pick up the phone, and Dr. Lynn Pascoe. They pick up their phones, the old-fashioned phones, and they together... Hard lines, yeah, landlines, and talk to whoever's on the line. Of course, we can hear that as well. And another thing that was interesting is that they have a field reporter, a guy that was in Red Dwarf, who's sort of the comic relief character. Mm-hmm. He runs around you can tell he's very skeptical, and he's like, ha 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 ha, sure, this is really happening. So he's doing the field reporting, And then there are some kids, they're in the middle of trick-or-treating and they stop and watch. There's some areas cordoned off in the neighborhood, and then you can see there's supposed real people standing
Jeannie's
there
talking
watching.
about Craig Charles, who was known as Lister in Red Dwarf.
Lister, exactly. And he's really funny. And so there he is interviewing people. And then people are going to recognize him, but again, they might think he's just there as a celebrity interviewer on the field. So no one's going to question that. And then you have people inside the house itself, the family. There's a woman and her 2 children, two girls. What's interesting, it's a woman and 2 girls. There's no father. There's no male character. And then you have another woman who happens to be the wife of one of the people that's in the studio. There's another area in the studio where someone is the primary person who's getting the interviews from either video or on the phone. And that person is her husband. So he's in the studio. She goes in to the house itself and is with this mother and her 2 daughters, and they're the ones that have said this stuff is going on in this house. And by the way, supposedly they did a lot of research to find out what is the most haunted house in England.
They used a computer to figure that out.
Computer. And we saw a Commodore.
Yeah, we saw
keyboard,
Commodore.
Computer,
I think it was a Commodore 128, but it could be wrong.
Sitting next to a television,
on the ground. Like, who uses a computer sitting on the ground?
It was weird,
as if her face stuck in a television,
almost like it was supposed to be controlling the television.
Well, that's how people use these things back then. It was actually done properly, which was really surprising.
Which was weird, right? So they're all in the house together, and again, they researched this ahead of time. They chose this particular house because it was the one that had the most activity. The doctor, Lynn Pascoe, was also consulted to find the perfect house, and apparently on Halloween every year, a lot more happens than usual. Let's try this. Let's do a live show. Let's see if anything happens. Let's capture it. So that's the setup.
Let's poke the supernatural with a stick.
A big stick, yeah.
Yes. So check this out. This is trivia on IMDb. It's the very first bit of trivia. I think Jeannie might have read this already.
Yeah.
It earned the dubious honor of being the first TV program to be cited in the British Medical Journal as having caused post-traumatic stress disorder on children.
Wow, yeah. Because families were watching this. Families were gathered on Halloween night.
9:30, right? I said at 9 or something.
They weren't trick-or-treating. Yeah. They stayed home. They watched this. And little did they know how scary it was going to be. I mean, I wasn't sure because they had a little preview and they had these 2 girls in their bedroom and things were shaking and falling off. And it's like, we've seen that a million times because... this is something that nowadays we're so used to this type of thing. But we can see if we put ourselves into 1992 and thinking it's a live show, it could be very scary. And there were some interesting things that happened that I did notice, and I had to literally get up and point them out. We had to freeze it, and I had to get up and point some stuff out to Luis because he didn't notice it.
Well, Jeannie spotted a lot of those. And now people mention that, there's up to 13 sightings.
Oh, it's like we should rewatch it. But okay, so there was, and I don't know if would we call that a spoiler? I guess we could call that a spoiler. I'm not going to mention that until we get into our spoiler section where we talk about stuff because we don't want to give that away.
Yeah, I'm not.
So just so you know, there are 13 sightings. Funny, lucky number 13, triskaidekaphobia, of the ghost in this particular live show. Again, television movie. And it went to breaks, but station identification breaks. It fades to black, fades right back in, right where they left off. There's no feeling like anything happened in between. So that was interesting. But it was done because, I guess, BBC had this station identification they needed to do. There were no real commercials.
Yeah.
So it was probably very... very scary for people. There was really no relief because station identification break is very short.
Someone in the UK can confirm if this is true or not because I'm not 100% sure that that's the case. So, but it seems there were some commercial breaks, but like Jeannie said, there were not commercial breaks for products or commercial breaks for the BBC.
Just station identification, we think. And that would have made it much scarier.
There's a very, very solid cast here. They're all playing it completely straight. And the fact that the BBC, in my opinion, makes to this day the best television in the world, because basically they were doing it before anyone else. I'm reading a book with a timeline on technology, and it says how the BBC became owned by the government, I think, around 1927. So they're going to be almost 100 years old soon enough. And the BBC quality standards are imitated and followed all over the world. Mm-hmm. They're the best for me. So the professionalism you see on a normal broadcast was actually done on this.
In this.
And that's what makes it so scary. Just like the world's
natural.
radio broadcast, Orson Welles was a genius.
Yeah.
He actually adapted, right, the book. The book is great, by the way.
Right.
So he adapted in a way that it was up to the standards of radio broadcasting news at the time.
Yes.
This is the same thing. And I just read that it was an inspiration for this.
It's got to be. Yeah. And it was so natural. Michael Parkinson, who has presented on other shows, hosted other shows, and is an established actor, he even gets skeptical at some point. Oh, yeah, there's a hoax.
They do a fake out at some point.
They did a fake out, with one of the daughters looking like they're doing something instead to call attention to themselves. Everything feels like it happens spontaneously. He'll hear a producer in his ear saying, oh, there's someone on the phone, or we have to switch to tape and show an old interview, or something that's happening live. And it's just really fluid, really natural.
I just read that his mother was watching it live and she thought it was real.
Wow. That's cool. That's cool. I'm a little worried to go into the spoiler section because we might have to go back to something that's more specific.
I don't know if there's anything else left, though.
Maybe not.
Because if you think about it, the setup of this is so simple.
Yeah.
It's set up as a news story.
Yes. Let's talk about maybe the evidence that was presented and why they chose, one of the reasons they chose the house. Little things here and there. They show things like one of the girls ends up having marks on her body at some point and on her face.
Scratches.
One of the scratches. One of the girls ends up keeping a little journal or diary, and you're drawing nice little pictures. And by the way, the first picture that we saw that she made looked like Pennywise, strangely enough, was very interesting. And then you can see that everything gets out of control, like she's not really controlling her own writing, and then the drawings are much scarier and darker. So we see that, and we've seen that in other shows. I don't know that it definitely predates everything else, but it's early on here. And feeling of found footage was also kind of scary. We didn't see that for a long time later. And even though it's not quote unquote found footage because it's happening live, the first thing you see is something that shows a camera was in a room and you're seeing what's going on in that room. So it's gritty. It's
like a security camera.
It looks like a security camera. We weren't seeing that at the time. So that's interesting. And then they had called something else infrared. But it wasn't. It was more of a heat.
It was more like heat vision. It reminded me of predator vision.
Yeah.
You know,
so
because if you really think about infrared cameras, the Sony camcorders from the 90s had infrared sensors, and they would have shine an infrared light on things, and then you would only work if you're really close to the subject, and then you would have a kind of a greenish tint image, and that was the infrared image. Yeah. But on this thing, it was like a heat vision thing.
It was really weird because when we were watching it, it started to cut out of the movie as if it was over, and it was going to credits, and we're like, wait, no, that's not it. So there was a glitch in the system. Was it was AMC Plus that we watched. I should mention that we watched on AMC Plus. And so we had to go back into it, and at that very moment it turned into this what looks like heat.
It's a heat vision thing.
There's a name for it. But it looked really scary, the way the heat was showing the faces. That looked really scary. And I wasn't... That could have been incredibly scary. And then even toward the end, they even flipped to the studio and there are no cameras. The presenter doesn't know where the cameras are anymore and is wandering around and confused and walking into the camera, not knowing where it is. So things are kind of falling apart and you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, so I just did some research and basically infrared and heat vision are basically the same thing.
Okay.
Infrared is just the kind of wavelength you're capturing, but the Sony cameras would just try to display that as a greenish image.
Okay.
But you need some processing on that image to actually show the temperature differentials in different colors.
So they were correct in calling it infrared.
Yeah.
You were worried that it might have been a
It was infrared,
misnomer.
but it was infrared because it took
correct.
that signal and then it measured the temperature and displayed the temperature in a way that it's understandable by us.
Right. So different uses of technology, different types of framing. That was really cool. And they had a lot of numerical information on the right when they were showing different pieces of footage. So it felt very real.
I haven't said who directed this thing. Who wrote
yes,
this.
we need to
do
that.
So the director is Leslie Manning.
Yes.
And she sounds like she was kind of a TV person early on. And the writer is Stephen Volk with a V. And he has done a few things that we know. We saw The Awakening for sure. I remember seeing The Awakening with
is that
with
the
Jeannie.
same Awakening with the one that was not that long? It was maybe a decade
2011.
old? Really?
That's the one we saw, yeah.
Did that one? Okay,
There's an
that's
interesting twist at the end.
Yeah.
He did The Guardian, which is an old B movie that I really like for some reason. I know it's not supposed to be very good. But I like that.
But you also wanted to mention, was it Communion or?
I think Communion, that horror movie about UFOs, might have been an inspiration.
Yeah, I don't know about Communion. I would say War of the Worlds is the real
the big
link.
Inspiration, I agree.
Maybe we go into spoilers?
I think so.
Okay. So,
Wait a minute, are we gonna...
I am the spoiler ghost, and I'm about to visit you.
Fee, fi, fo, fum.
Don't fast forward.
What big eyes you have.
So, what was interesting, there were
this is the spoiler section.
So this is the spoiler section. There was a fee, fi, fo, fum quote from the ghost through the presenter, I believe.
Yeah.
He said fee, fi, fo, fum.
Fee, fi, fo, fum.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the ghost is has possessed the presenter toward the end, but before that possessed one of the girls, and her name is Suzanne. She says, "What big eyes you have." The whole wolf, Red Riding Hood quote.
Susie.
Big bad wolf.
Stop it! Stop it, Susie!
So I thought it was interesting that even though it was well written, the only quotes that you had from the ghost itself were sort of these nursery rhyme / Mother Goose story types of quotes. I thought that was a little, I guess you would say, fables.
I know.
It's
very literary ghost. You really like to read. I guess because he was a ghost before.
But a kid's story, basically. It's kids' horror story.
So I just read that this thing inspired that really cool horror movie that came out during the pandemic called Host.
Right. Makes sense.
So that makes perfect sense.
Okay, so some interesting spoilers. As Louise mentioned, there are 13 sightings. I can tell you that toward the beginning, they make this more obvious. There's an area where they turn off the light in the girl's bedroom, and you see in the curtains, you see a shape. And so you start seeing a head and then shoulder and then the rest of what looks like a body standing at the curtain. And it was pretty effective because it blended in so nicely with the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was fairly well done, especially for that time period. And they do point it out because someone calls in and says, "Oh, I saw this." And the doctor's like, "Oh, I didn't see that. I've reviewed that footage many times." And then they show it and then they run it back and you don't see it anymore. It's gone. Was that there before? When we first saw it,
I don't know.
Maybe
we just didn't see it.
That's crazy. Because her eyes were probably focused on them.
That's not enough.
Ah!
I can't
What's
see anything
going
around myself.
on?
False alarm.
Oh my God, it's not there anymore. It's not there. So that's progressive because something that we see now and we're already fascinated by, taking what we see as found footage and then you look at it once and you see one thing, you look at it again, you see something else. That's revolutionary for the time.
And they buried a lot of those things in there. I think Jeannie might have spotted like 4 or 5 or something. I missed most of them.
Well, I had to get up and show them what I thought was a really obvious one.
They were supposed to be kind of buried in there. There was even one outside with the reporter, the guy that was on Red Dwarf.
I want to tell everybody about the sighting that I saw that was really obvious. You were like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, I had to get up and point it out. So let me tell you.
Jeannie spotted it in a reflection.
So this is when Sarah, she's the one that goes into the house and sort of hangs out with everybody. And then there's also a cameraman and probably a sound guy that are all together. And she does all kinds of things. She's very much one that we follow throughout. She kind of, I would say, grounds this the most. We feel like we're kind of following her around most of the time. When all of the children's art ended up on the ground and she was leaning over and picking it up.
The papers,
So she's picking up all the artworks that somehow flew off the fridge and other areas. She's picking it all up. We think the ghost caused the art to fly off, and we also heard a bunch of noise. There's a screen door with a big glass door, and as she's getting up, you see someone, I think, holding a boom or someone holding a camera, but then you see right next to that person, a reflection, way in the back, a person standing, bald head, and some sort of weird outfit.
The darkened eye, the weird black outfit.
Yeah, weird black
pipes,
outfit.
Right?
So the apparition of the ghost itself, we see in the reflection of the glass. And Luis didn't see that. So I actually got up and stood right next to the TV and pointed it out. Mm-hmm. And then it was really obvious to you, right?
It was
super obvious because
it was
the
just a quick
coloring
cut and
was
I missed
different.
it,
And it panned up.
Yeah.
There's a head.
I see it.
You see him,
I see it, yeah, sure. It's a good
He's
point.
not there when they turn around and show just a guy.
All right.
Did you?
That's a really good catch.
Go back upstairs and
Shh. Look, there's no one there.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned pipes. We should explain what pipes means. Mm-hmm. There's two girls. There's Suzanne, which we mentioned before, who's an older, maybe, I don't know, 12, 13. And then
she
there's
looks
a
like she's
younger,
preteen.
Yeah, preteen. And then there's a younger girl named Kim. She would hear these noises, these banging sounds. And she would say to her mom, there's a bunch of sounds. What is it? Is it a ghost? And initially, no one thinks there's a ghost. So the mother says, oh, no, it's just the pipes.
It's an old house. It's the pipes.
Yeah, it's just the pipes.
Central heating, right? That's the explanation that she gave her. Yeah.
And so Kim calls the ghost, because she does see the ghost, pipes.
get it off! I've got to talk to somebody!
I
gotta talk to somebody.
Kimmy? Who? Kim, who are you talking to? Pipes. Where's Pipes? Here.
So now Pipes becomes the name of the ghost, but only named by this little girl, Kim. So that's what you were saying. So every time we have a sighting, you said that there were 13.
Yeah.
That's total, the sighting of quote-unquote Pipes, who is named by the little girl as the ghost. So that's the ghost.
So Pipes becomes this quote-unquote character, which is what they say is a real actual ghost that's been there. And as the movie progresses, two different people call with information on the house itself. And they kind of start telling, okay, so there was someone who lived there. Oh, they rented a room. Oh, yeah, that was illegal back then, so it wouldn't be on your records. Okay, it was this person. And the whole explanation on who the ghost was based on, or who I guess the ghost was before it became a ghost.
Yeah, and that was sort of toward the end. That was a reveal.
Yeah.
There were different people calling in for different reasons and about their own experiences or about what they heard about the house or whatever. What Luis is mentioning is someone toward the end of the movie actually explaining who that ghost is. So the origin of this Pipes character, the people that own the house illegally rented out a space to this person. It wasn't on the books, so to speak.
And the person who was disturbed actually said that he saw a woman. So there's the original ghost who's a woman, and then she haunts this guy who commits a series of crimes and basically dies. They found his body 12 days later in the little room after the cats were done with him, eating him.
Yeah, so the cats are important to mention.
Big element.
But let's go back to the woman part, because a lot of people were saying, I see a figure in a dress. And some people will say, it looks like a bald head, but then it looks like there's a dress. And so people were getting confused. Is this a woman? Is this a man? Is this a dress, or is it a robe, or is it something else? So there was that interesting sort of mix of confusion about who the character was. Back in 1992, the whole idea of someone maybe cross-dressing, it doesn't have the same acceptance as it does now. And one of the things that was going on with this person had a social worker. They were just a disturbed individual.
The woman who was the original ghost was actually basically possessing the guy and having him dressed as a woman.
And so,
and that's why people saw the bald ghost with the darkened eye and a dress.
Did the person actually dress like that when he was alive, or is this he only comes
From
as
the
a
social
ghost?
worker, it sounds like it was happening in real life at the time.
Okay,
that he was
so
getting
that was
obsessed with the
because
concept.
of the ghost of him being haunted by a previous ghost, which you don't really hear about. Who is this previous ghost? We don't seem to have any intel on that ghost.
Or maybe we missed it because it was definitely very thin.
Right.
Once you go beyond
that part,
this figure, the Pipes character, it gets thin beyond him. I think at least that was my impression.
One of the things that happens during this haunting is that you start to hear cat sounds.
Very distressing cat sounds.
First it just sounds like a few of them, but it's like a yowl or yelp, or no, it's called a
anger.
caterwaul or something. Yeah, so you hear it every so often, and then you start hearing more and more and more, and they're all over the place. They're in the walls. It's very Edgar Allan Poe, like The Black Cat, where the cat's in the wall. And it also explains the scratches on the face.
Because they make
So
a
Suzanne's
passing comment about animal cruelty, or how the guy was guilty of that, and that's why he had his tools under the stairs in the let's just say it's an interesting adjective followed by hole. And
gosh, okay, that's another thing.
And he was under the stairs.
Oh my gosh.
And they said that the guy had his tools there.
All right.
And then there's a mention of cats being tortured or something.
Was the cat's torture revealed by the caller that was the social worker?
I think it was the caller, because
this happens during the end.
Because then he dies in under the stairs, and the cats ate him. Yeah.
Okay, so the social worker who calls in reveals a number of pieces of information. Number one, what we already talked about the guy being disturbed and also being disturbed by a previous ghost, and then dressing in this black dress, and then illegally renting out the space somehow from the people that own the home, and then somehow doing something with cats and torturing them. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Tortured cats. Did he do anything to people?
I don't know.
See, that wasn't clear. Maybe they wanted to be careful because it was a television. It was 1992. They wanted to be maybe a little bit careful about talking about people being killed. So maybe that's why. It was still scary enough.
And Jeannie mentioned the cat scratches, in the girl's face.
The girl's face.
That makes sense if you think that they're dead cats' spirits, so dead cats who are still angry to this day.
Right.
And who were acting up, and explaining the scratches.
And they glommed on to her.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting as well. Yeah, there was something else that you said. There was a whole other topic that we didn't cover. You were just saying.
But whole.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We can talk about that. We can mention that. Okay. So what's really weird is there's this little room under the stairs, like on the side.
There's a word for it. In English, there's a name for it.
Door.
People call it something.
Yeah, it's a little side door.
Yeah,
it looks like a cupboard, but it's like a side door that's right under their stairwell. That massive area that you have, where the top of the stairs and then all the way down, right? So you can always put a little doorway in there. And this was obviously something at the time, and maybe it's something that's okay to say in Britain and in England. But they call this little room a glory hole.
That makes no sense.
And maybe, and we neglected to look that up, and I think Louise is going to look it up now to find out if the origin of that term in England was completely acceptable. It might have the other meaning only here in the U.S. and maybe in other locations, but of course it means something else over here, and everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
But what took us out of the movie a little bit was they kept mentioning the glory hole, and they're pointing out this little space, and that's of course where the ghost basically resides and where he died, and apparently
Oh my
the
God.
cats
Okay,
attacked
so according
him.
to Gemini, who is, Google's AI, it says that in England during the 90s, glory hole was often referred to a cupboard or storage space. It was similar to Americans' term junk drawer. Could be a nook, an alcove, or other small area.
Alcove is a good word too. Nook.
Crazy.
Alcove.
Of course, we see this in the US in 2024, and we're laughing our asses off, saying, "Why are they calling it that?"
But I don't know that it does. So is it still called glory hole?
I don't know.
Or did that change?
I don't know if it
in
changed.
England as well. Maybe not. But there are different terms that don't work well, between cultures, and they're fine in other cultures. So. It could still be. But that was an interesting curio from the times, perhaps. But it did take us out of the movie because we're watching it and they're calling it glory hole constantly. And it's where this horrible thing was going on with a ghost. Is that the rented space?
It was, yeah, exactly.
So it was this tiny, it was almost like they were hiding him out there. It seems very strange to me that someone would reside in that tiny little nook under the staircase. Like, who would rent out that quote-unquote glory hole to someone at the time? So there's probably more to be said and stated about the background of this ghost when this person was alive. And then, of course, Louise mentioned it, but the fact that the cats were freaking out. No one knew he had died. How did he die?
I don't know how he died.
Okay.
They just found his body 12 days later.
But then they found his body, and the cats were hungry because they were his cats, I guess.
Yeah.
And they had
a snack.
Snacked on him. But then now my other question, and maybe Louise caught this, what happened to the people that rented the glory hole out to him?
Not explained.
Okay, so I don't even know if they're there. Maybe they moved, forgot about him or something. Oh yeah, we rented a space out to this guy for,
well, no one noticed he died. That much is established. So most likely he haven't heard from him for 12 days, and then there was a smell.
With the social
worker.
worker.
And the cats were making noise.
But they knew he was in that glory hole space. Anyway, okay.
In terms of narrative, of course, it's a very slow boil.
Yeah.
Not a lot happens in the first 45 minutes, but they use it all to set it up as a real thing, and it works beautifully.
Yes.
Right. All the technology is perfect. It all matches.
Yeah.
Perfect excuse or why they have cameras in the rooms. There's a dude with a giant camera with wires walking around the house.
Yeah, you see the wires all in the...
Yeah.
Yeah, everything looks very realistic.
The whole thing is super realistic.
The studio feels real.
It's a real house.
Yeah.
I don't think the house is a set
feels real.
at all. It's a real house.
Yeah.
And
outside,
when things start to escalate, they do a fake out where we see the older girl making noises and banging the walls, and she gets confronted, and the TV host gets kind of briefly angry as if the whole thing is a hoax.
Oh, this is a hoax. I'm wasting my time.
You all right? Come on. It wasn't me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
What the fuck?
Oh, that's quite extraordinary. We set out to catch a ghost, and sadly, very sadly, what we witnessed was a remarkable exposure of a hoax.
Let's not be too hasty.
Oh, come on.
They have some American guy in New York, a skeptical, saying, "Oh yeah, a skeptic, saying, oh, ghosts don't really exist."
Yeah.
And the whole time I was thinking,
he even that mentions Venice Beach. He says to the doctor, the woman, says, "Oh yeah, you should just go sell crystals in Venice." Beach.
I'm like, whoa, this guy really is American. I found out that he's a British actor or something that moved to America in the 50s.
That's so funny.
So he's a guy who would really live here. He would know about Venice Beach too.
Right.
But they do this kind of fake out, and then very soon after, I would say 20 minutes before the thing ends, and it's a short movie. It's like an hour and a half.
They're like, oh yeah, this isn't real. This is a hoax like we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and then everybody starts freaking out again, and you think, oh no, these terrible things are happening. And then it goes off, everything goes dead, and then you see the snow and the
analog signal falls off.
And they have a break where the host is talking, and there's other people talking in the studio, and then all of a sudden you go back. It's like, oh, it looks like they're okay now. And you see the two girls,
the reporter.
Exactly. And you see the camera person, and they're sort of playing a board game.
It looks like Ludo, by the way.
He's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. And Louise and I are like,
No,
that's old
it's not
footage
fine.
or wrong footage or
And
something
then
like
the it's not a psychotherapist. The what's her
that. The
name?
parapsychologist?
Thank you.
Yeah.
The parapsychologist says, "Wait a minute," and then she walks to the big TV wall in the
Yeah.
back with like the 9 TVs or more TVs that make like a grid.
Yes.
And she's like, "That thing on the wall
Had fallen off
had
earlier.
fallen off because of a poltergeist."
Right. So why
It's
is that
a
back
phenomenon.
on?
Why?
No one put it back up.
This footage is not live.
No.
This picture we're seeing now isn't live. This is some earlier footage from earlier in the evening. This is just a cover. It's a dupe.
But
This
what,
isn't happening now.
but what is?
Oh my
And
goodness.
who's messing with it?
The spirit.
Yeah.
You got on the machine.
Are you saying there's a ghost in the machine?
So they're implying that the ghosts basically used the Ghostwatch TV show to spread out to people's homes and to, in fact, to stop their clocks, to destroy things.
But to go into the footage and grab old footage and
Yeah.
run it.
Yeah.
So to control it in that way. And yes, the bigger point, which I believe you're getting to,
It is, this whole
is that
seance
the
thing.
whole thing is considered a seance because it's live, it's going into people's homes, and it's obviously going into people's homes in real life. And now it's a mass seance, which gives the ghost more power.
Yeah, exactly. And I read that the filmmakers actually wanted to, at some point, have a line in the show where they say, "And the ghost is in your place right now."
Woo!
And they didn't
It
do
was
it.
too scary.
Yeah, but there's
People
a
were
couple
too
things.
scared.
There's an occult thing called an egregore, which is like something that's formed when a lot of people believe in the same thing, like a lot of people praying at the same time or believing in a creature at the same time. An egregore is something that you have to willfully put your belief in and your faith in. And basically, groups like the Rosicrucians and other groups, spiritualists, they will, all pray at the same time or have some thoughts at the same
Right.
time. And they used to have like a healing egregore. So
Right.
if someone needs to be healed, they all think about the person at the same time. The Rosicrucians do this to this day, I think.
But it's like when people do the mass praying, where they say, "Oh, we'll pray for you. We'll do a prayer circle." Or
yeah,
we'll do
it's the same
this."
idea. But an egregore
But
has
it's
to be really
much
big
larger,
to have an
much
effect.
larger, and like
Right.
Reiki, and people
Yeah.
will do Reiki from afar. Egregore.
Yeah,
I guess the group mind might sum it up,
kind of.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like having a mass seance.
yeah.
And that means that the entity has a lot more power.
It's feeding on that.
And toward the end, when the presenter starts saying fee fi fo fum and other things, and can't find the camera and all this other stuff,
It
everything's
attacks the
falling
studio.
apart.
It
It
attacks the
attacks
stu-
everything. It attacks the studio. It attacks the trailer outside the house.
Yeah.
And everything's exploding.
Yeah,
and,
the media thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically they needed an ending, right? And without
Right.
killing anyone. So the sound guy gets heavily injured when he goes into the little nook. He gets boinked in the head by something. And he's unconscious. So they carry him out. The girls seem to be okay, but traumatized, of course. And everybody comes out. Oh no. At the very end, the journalist, the main reporter, goes into the nook. And they're like, "Are you sure you
Sarah.
want to do this?" And she's like in the dark. And they have only a heat vision camera. And she goes in and you see the floor. And then the door closes behind her.
And you see
And
the
she
weird...
starts screaming.
Yeah.
And we hear the cats.
And that's
And
where
then
you
it-
see the heat, the
Yeah.
infrared.
We had a little bit of that, yeah.
That's so weird looking
Yeah,
on her
and
face.
then it ends, and it ends in a pretty shocking way because, of course, now you assume if there's someone who had a very untimely end on a thing, it's going to be her.
Yeah,
And it's funny because Jeannie the whole time was like, "But she's so intimate with this family. It's like she's part of the family."
Right.
And I think it was done on purpose. They really wanted her to feel like she was an integral part of that
Yeah.
core. There's no husband. Clearly, the ghost thing has destroyed the woman's marriage. And at some point, the oldest girl was like, "Oh, you're gonna leave us." So the oldest girl, when they do the fake out and imply that maybe the whole thing is a hoax, it's kind of explained as if the older girl wanted to do something to hold on to,
to hold
the mother,
on to the mom.
yeah, to whatever was left of
Right.
their family. But
So my quick question is the reporter, Sarah, the only one in that nook? Because I thought one of the kids was in there too.
I don't
I thought
know.
they
The
said,
two
what
kids come
happened
out.
to
The kids come.
the one kid? I thought Kim came out and maybe Suzanne
Jeannie
didn't,
might
but
be
maybe
right.
I'm wrong.
Maybe there's another. Maybe she
I
went
might
there.
be wrong.
She was looking for someone.
Yes, I thought she went in there to look
I
for
think
the
Jeannie might be
Suzanne.
right. Yeah.
Or maybe Kim. I don't
I
remember
think it was
which.
the oldest girl, but I could be wrong.
But I don't know if that's super relevant. The point is that one or two people are in danger.
Yeah, so it has
now,
a very
at the
shocking
end.
ending in terms of what
And the
happens in the
studio's
studio,
mess.
which is done in a really funny way, in a way, because it shows the
Presenters
host
possessed.
Kinda, yeah,
He's
and
possessed.
he's kind of wondering, like, is this camera working?
Right.
I don't know.
He doesn't know
And
what's
he's
going
like,
on. Yeah.
A very internal monologue kind of thing, but
Right.
spoken out loud.
And he said fee fi fo fum.
Yeah, and the shocking ending under the staircase in the nook,
Yeah.
which we shall call a nook and not
Yeah,
the
not
glory
the
hole.
other.
But it's just fascinating. And then I just read that actually there was a guy that's supposed to kill himself 4 days after watching this.
Oh no!
Because he really believed there were ghosts in his house.
Oh my gosh!
Because they
well,
had loud
they had
pipes.
that medical journal say that it was PTSD, and probably
Yeah.
also mentioned that someone was affected and
Yeah, the medical journal said
Killed
that
himself.
they had 2 cases of children who were diagnosed as having PTSD
yeah, because families were
because
watching
they saw it.
Yeah.
And what I read is that the BBC introduced it as part of a fiction, as a label that denoted this is a fictional work.
Work
and
of
it even
fiction.
said, and it even said written by. But what happens that you gotta think
People-
in terms of 1992.
Right, people didn't.
They
see
weren't
the
watching
beginning.
it from the beginning.
No, people would
They
come in.
They
late.
were like come in late, and when they came in late,
They had no
they
idea.
missed that.
But that's what is the same thing happened with War of the Worlds. They
Yeah.
announced it at the very, very beginning that
Yeah.
it was a work of fiction, and then people came in late
But
and
it's
had
even
no clue.
But it's even worse than that. That crazy phone number was real.
Oh no!
And
Okay,
if-
there was a
and
really
if-
weird
and
phone
if
number. It
you
was like
called-
081.
and if you called-
811
and of course, this is off-
8811. Why the 8 and 1?
Yeah, I don't know.
The
This
one
is
and
all
eight.
for IMDb. Okay, it has to be vetted. But anyway,
Okay.
if you called and got connected, they will say, "This is fiction." But if you still would like to share your ghost stories, go
And
ahead.
so people were calling
But guess
in.
what? The people who couldn't tell their stories because it was busy
Oh.
got the sign off engaged, as in it's a real number. So there were, from the very few
was
people who
probably-
actually spoke to an operator, got the message saying this is fiction and told the stories, there were countless others.
But that's important information. Are you saying that the people that were calling in were really calling in? When they were getting people to call in
I'm not
during
sure.
this live?
I'm not sure. I don't think so because that recorded the whole thing ahead
That's
of
what
time.
I thought. I thought this was a recorded. This was not a live broadcast.
No, but they allowed people to call and contribute their real ghost stories.
Even though they didn't use them.
Yeah.
Shadows would move at the end of my bed. So I asked for a nightlight. I asked a grown-up, I think it was my grandmother, which made the situation worse in a way because
Ugh.
Well, can we just clear the set? Well, something's gone very wrong with that ghost story. Probably, I'll apologise.
And I read that
Yeah.
Judi Dench was watching it, and then she was thinking it was real, but then she saw a friend of hers playing the psychologist.
I knew it wasn't
And she
real.
got angry at her friend, saying, "And now I know it's not real because I
That's
know
so
who you
funny.
are." You
Well,
know?
it's good that she knew,
Yeah.
though.
But
Because otherwise she
wow.
might have had PTSD.
What a ride! There's a
Yeah,
whole
anyway,
documentary
this
made
is
about
really
this,
cool.
and you know,
Very cool. All right, everybody. It is time to bid you adieu
yes.
or farewell.
So we
Toodaloo.
must say bye
For now.
for now.
Mr. Pipes is here.
Mr. Pipe's here.
Actually, was I called just Pipes?
B505.
Madam Pipes or Mr. Pipes? I don't know. Pick one.
Goodbye.